Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be looking at a few highly anticipated releases. So we have the new Byredo Transcendent palette, and this is their holiday release for the year. So it's been coming in and out of stock, so definitely if you're interested in it, just keep an eye out. It's still coming. And then we have the new highlighter from Hermes. And this is the shade number 2 or Rose. I mean, look at this beautiful embossing on here. Really beautiful. So again, just like the Byredo, this just came out, so it's been going in and out of stock. In addition, we also have just a quick look at the Tarte Creaseless Setting Powder, and this is in the shade Lavender, and the new Celine lipstick. So this is a Celine lipstick here, heavy duty. You can see we have an incredibly strong magnet. Let's start off with this. So the fashion brand Celine is bringing out a makeup line, and this year for 2024, they're releasing their first lipstick in their flagship color. So this is called Le Rouge Triomphe, and it's a satin lipstick, and there are going to be a bunch of other colors that come out in 2025, and I think we'll also be looking at some other items by the end of 2025. So you can see here that it is a red satin. We have the Celine logo here, and this is I didn't count the sides, but it's a polygonal shape here. And we have an incredibly strong magnet, very, very strong magnet. So this feels weighty, it feels heavy. You can see we do have plastic inside, but it's weighty enough even with that plastic. So it has a luxe feel to it. I think the polygonal shape here kind of helps prevent some of the fingerprint smudges from showing too much, but it is a fingerprint magnet. We have the Celine logo on the top, and let's take a look at our shade here. Now, this again is shade number 1, and it's a satin, and it is going to be a cool tone red, but it's actually not as cool tone as it looks on the swatches. You can see it on my lips how it looks significantly warmer, and we're going to talk about that in just a second when we look at the lip swatches. But this is going to be a cooler tone pink, so if you do have a warmer skin tone, you are going to see a bit more pink in it. And let's take a look at the lip swatches. Now, as for product details, we have 3.5 grams of product. The lipstick is pretty expensive. It retails for $75 US, and it is made in France. As for fragrance, there is a fragrance, and it's like one of those floral powdery smells. It actually reminds me a lot of baby powder. So it kind of has that baby powder scent mixed with a floral fragrance. So I wouldn't say it's, overpowering. You can definitely smell it during application. Once it's on, it kind of fades away and you don't really notice it. I would say it's not as strong as the Guerlain Rouge G lipsticks, but it's definitely there. I would say it's a little more subtle than that, but not significantly. As for the red, now my skin tone is going to be fair neutral, but I have cooler overtones. So that does kind of reflect how things look on me. Those cooler overtones make it look a little bit warmer on my lips than it does on my hand swatch. Overall, I have to say, I think it's a really beautiful red shade. It is pretty neutral when I put it on my lips, but again, if you're going to have a warmer skin tone than I do, then it's going to appear a little bit pinker, a little bit more cool than it is on me. If you're cooler than I am, you perhaps might see a little bit more of the orangey tones in here. So I think this will vary on different skin tones, but I think it's going to be a nice red on a wide variety of skin tones. It's really a pretty classic red shade. As for the formula, it has that nice traditional satin formula. I put this on, you could see, I just kind of wanted to see how it looked if I sheared this out. You could definitely shear this out and get more of a light pinky red kind of shade. Put that with a little lip balm and have a lighter look, but it is pretty pigmented with one swipe. The texture of the satin, it has a little bit of grip. However, if you do have mature skin, fine lines like around your lips, I do anticipate a little bit of bleeding. I could see that that's definitely something, a little bit of feathering around the lines. So I would definitely recommend a lip pencil to pair with this if that is an issue that you've experienced with other products. So this is definitely not something that the formula is prone to feathering and bleeding, but with those deeper shades, you definitely tend to see a little bit more of that. You know, it's a little bit more prominent, a little bit easier to see. And so I could see that around my lip line, I could see like the edges feather a little bit. So just something to note. However, it is going to be a stiffer satin formula, so it doesn't feel too oily. And, you know, it has a really nice texture. I actually really like the texture a lot. It reminds me of the older formula of the Guerlain Rouge G in terms of texture. The newer ones seem to have a little bit more oil or slip to them. And so this reminds me more of the previous iteration, or even the one before that as well, back when, before they had the decorative cases and they were just the silver bullets. So that's kind of what this feels like to me. Now, I would say that's the closest formula in terms of comparison. So let's take a look at a few comparisons. This is one of the Valentino lipsticks in the shade 22A. I'm going to put this one vertically so you can kind of see, or well, horizontally, so you can kind of see the difference here. You can see that the Celine has a little bit more pink in it compared to the Valentino, which is slightly more red. This is the Guerlain Rouge G in 510 Velvet. This is the one they're promoting with the Guerlain Pucci. You can see this is going to be significantly warmer. It's more of an orangey red. And this is in the older formula for the Guerlain Rouge G Velvets in 770. And this is one of my favorites. You can see it's very similar to the shade of the Celine. However, this is ever so slightly cooler in tone. We've got more pink in it than the Celine. The Celine is really a nice mix of these two. All right, and this is the Burberry lipstick in Military Red, which is going to be a bit warmer as well. And I was trying to find the Dior in 999, but I don't think I have that in lipstick form anymore. So I'll just go ahead and swatch the sequin. It's going to be a little bit different, but just so you can get an idea of the color. So this is the Dior sequin in 999. And overall, the Dior 999 lipstick is going to be warmer than that of the Celine. So I hope those were helpful. Let's take a quick look at the Tarte setting powder. So this is the Tarte Creaseless Setting Powder, and I have shade Lavender. And you can see we have kind of this opalescent lavender kind of lid here. This is really meant more for under the eyes, and it comes with a little puff that fits perfectly there around your nose and so forth. I really like how this opens up, and this is going to be a powder that, you know, it feels, I didn't get all of that lipstick off. Here is the lavender powder though, but it feels like a nice texture, pretty finely milled, and it is going to be more of a matte lavender. So let's take a look at the demo here for this. You can see here in the demo that I'm testing it out underneath the eye, which is really more of its intended purpose, but I also want to try it all over the face. Now, if you are planning on using this all over the face, I actually think it does a nice job. However, it is a little bit harder because the opening for the container is a little bit smaller than usual for a face powder. Now, we do have 7 grams of product with a 1-year shelf life with this powder, and it's made in Italy. Now, according to Tarte, this is a loose setting powder with puff included for a natural brightened under eye that will stay all day. And it does use their Amazonian clay that you find in a lot of their products. It's free of parabens, formaldehydes, a whole bunch of things. It has less than 1% synthetic fragrance, and it's cruelty free. According to Tarte, this setting powder gives you a smooth, sweat-proof finish that lasts up to 16 hours with no flashback, just fabulousness. The powder keeps skin smooth, not cakey or flat. Overall, I think it's actually a really nice setting powder. It's a really beautiful shade, and I do have a couple of other comparisons I wanted to take a quick look at. So this is the Anna Sui powder that I just looked at in the previous video. So this is a moisture powder, whereas the other one is going to be, the Tarte is just a regular powder. You can see that the Anna Sui has a little bit more pink to it. It's a little bit of a rosier, brighter purple. And in comparison, the Tarte has a little bit more blue. It's definitely more matte. So let's take a look at how the new Addiction Tokyo, this is the Lilac Glow Powder. And I apologize, my hands are stained. So we've been tie-dyeing. The kids had off of school, so their friends came over. We had a huge tie-dye party. The gloves leaked, and I haven't been able to get it off yet. So the powder doesn't swatch well, but color-wise, the Addiction Tokyo and the Tarte are pretty similar. However, I do think that this is a little bit more purple, a little less white in comparison. Okay, here's just a little bit more of that to try to swatch. Let's see. So there you go. It's just, they're slightly different tones, but they are pretty close. They're pretty similar. And then the last one I want to look at is the SUQQU powder that came out. This is a limited edition. It came out a little while back. And you can see that that is going to be a similar tone. This one is slightly more blue, more of a like lighter, brighter blue base to it. So those are the purple powders. Again, we have the Tarte in lavender. This is the Anna Sui. This one here is Addiction Tokyo, and this is SUQQU. So let's go ahead and move on to the Hermes highlighter. So this is the new highlighter from Hermes, and I apologize because I know the lights are probably reflecting on here. And you can see we do have a really beautiful embossing. This is a shade Or Rose. And it really is kind of like, instead of I don't really think of it more as a gold rose. I think slightly coppery rose. I do wish it was a little bit cooler in tone, but the formula on this is great. It really just kind of melts into the skin. And I think it's a really beautiful product. So let's take a look at the demos. Now, as for product details, this has a 1-year shelf life. It has 7 grams of product. It's made in Italy. It retails for $111 US here. It's still coming out to other retailers. This is the Poudre 24 Faubourg, and it's shade number 2 Or Rose. Now, they did come out with a smaller highlighter like this a couple of years back, and it was a golden shade. I did pass that on to a friend of mine because the shade was too deep and warm for me, but I do really like this one. So this is one I'll be holding on to. We have more of a metallic finish. You don't actually see any real glitter particles in here, but you do have some finely milled shimmer, and it's really more noticeable when you have it layered a little bit more deeply. So today's look, I have the highlighter on just a little bit more heavily, and you can see that shimmer when the light hits it. But if you put it on with one of the lighter application methods, it really just kind of melts into the skin, and you just have a little glint of, you know, the light shining through. And I think this rosy hue in here really helps kind of blend with the skin a little bit. I think it's a really beautiful shade, and the formula is very nice. So let's take a look at a few comparisons. I want to start off with the Rose Atacama, which is one of my favorite highlighters. This is going to be significantly more subtle. It's significantly lighter. It's more of a soft, you know, kind of a soft peachy rose kind of shade, but it's definitely much more subtle and significantly lighter. So let me go ahead. I'm going to take this. I'm going to put a big vertical swatch of this going down my arm so we can take a look at a bunch of different highlighters. So this is the Hermes, and I wanted to take a look at the new Dior holiday highlighters, and let's go numerically. So this one here is number 1 Or Lumiere, and you can see this is going to be warmer, more golden peach. Then we have the Corail Lumiere number 2, which is my favorite of the two, but you can see these are pretty similar. This one has a little bit more of a color flip. There's a little bit more, it's not a duochrome, but you can see it's more of like a coral base with golden shimmer. So when the light hits it, you get a little bit of a color reflect. But this shade is going to be relatively similar to the Hermes. This is Tom Ford in Peach Light. Let's go ahead and take a look at these. That's a lighter shade. and that's a deeper shade. You can see that the deeper shade is going to be slightly deeper than the Hermes, but we're still in the same vein of the color. The Hermes has a little bit more rose in it compared to the Tom Ford, but they're close. And then this is the Chanel oversized highlighter in Or Rose. So you can see the difference. The Chanel is significantly more orange, more copper, and it's a lot warmer. And then we have the Diamond Dust highlighter from Chanel. This is from holiday this year. And you can see how much lighter this is. This is going to be more of a soft gold with a pink reflect. So those are a few comparisons. I hope that was helpful. I would say color-wise is probably closest to the deep shade in Tom Ford Peach Light, followed by the Dior Corail Lumiere. But there are differences with both of those. The Hermes formula is very nice, and it just kind of melts into the skin very beautifully. I have to say, I really like it. I do wish that the shade was slightly cooler, but I think it still looks beautiful. So I'm happy to have it, and it is a highlighter that I would recommend. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Byredo eyeshadow palette. So this is the new Byredo Transcendent eyeshadow palette. And I have to say, I had mixed thoughts before I purchased this, just because some of the colors, I'm just going to do a double layer to make the swatches a little thicker here. Some of the shades look pretty similar. This is the second shade. You can see when I'm putting this on, this one's a little bit dry, a little crumbly. So I'm not super thrilled with the second shade in here. Our third shade has a really beautiful creamy metallic formula here. And you can see it's kind of like a soft spring green mixed with a little bit of yellow, almost a chartreuse. And then this is going to be a slightly deeper metallic shade. This is also creamy. This is actually creamier than the middle shade. And you can see this is more of an olive green with a little bit of a yellow golden shimmer in it. And then our last shade here is really the only one that's a little different. So this has a kind of like this dark gray black base to it, and it has a burgundy hue in there, and you can see there's a tiny bit of kind of like a reddish burgundy shimmer in there. So these are the 5 shades in the Byredo palette. Let's take a look at the eye swatches and the demo. So I purchased this palette from Neiman Marcus. It did sell out, but it will be back. We have 8 grams of product. It's a 1-year shelf life, and this is made in Italy. Now, if you're not familiar with the Byredo Nugget or Oyster palettes, the formulas can be kind of hit or miss, and they don't really seem consistent. One of the nice things I do like about these palettes is that you do have a variety of formulas typically in here. So our first shade is a creamy matte, and it's a deep blue-based green. It's not as blue-based as a spruce green. We definitely have a little bit more gray in it than that, but it is going to be kind of that deep evergreen kind of shade with a little bit more blue. Whereas the second shade has a bit more brown in it. That one, though, is the one that is just a little bit too dry and powdery, and it's actually more of a brown moss kind of shade. It's pretty deep. I have to say, on the eyes, I do feel like these 2 shades look pretty similar. And if you're using these together on the eyes, it's really easy to kind of get more of a muddier look. You don't see too much distinction between the 2 shades. The same is also true for the next 2 shades, however, not to the same extent. You can see the middle shade definitely has a bit more yellow in there. It's got more of that spring green mixed in there. And both of these formulas are metallic, but the one in the middle is a little bit of a firmer, creamy formula, whereas the 4th shade in the palette it has a little bit more moisture to the cream. And I think they're both really beautiful shades, but the 4th shade is a little bit easier to use and blend out and get that really smooth metallic look. The middle shade has a little bit more shimmer and glitter in it, so just something to note. Now the last shade, I was actually hoping for something a little bit more. When you blend this out, you do really see kind of this deep cocoa brown base. with a little bit of burgundy, and you can actually see a little bit of a black base in this if you blend enough. And we do have a little bit of a reddish shimmer in here, but unfortunately, I feel like this shade, you know, when you pair this with the greens, it gets overwhelmed. You don't really see it. It's not really impactful with those unless you're just using it with the lighter two. So that's something to note. And I do feel like this is a shade that I just feel like it could have been a little bit more impactful if the purpley burgundy tones in here were a little bit brighter. I think it would have stood out a little bit more. Formula wise, I would say that this shade is kind of a cross between the third and the fourth shade. It's kind of got that creamy texture to it, really easy to use, but you know, it does not have that metallic finish really that we get with the other two. So overall, I think the formulas in this palette, aside from the second shade, are good. The second shade though really brings it down. And I feel like when you're paying this much for an eyeshadow palette, it'd be great to have all 5 shades working well. My other issue is just that some of the shades do look pretty similar on the eye. So I wish there was a little bit more variation or a little bit more contrast in the shades here. I love the concept of this color story. I love the ideas of these colors together, but I just wish that tonally there was a little bit more contrast between the shades than there is in reality. Now, I'm somebody who absolutely loves green eyeshadows, and I still really like this palette, but I can't say that it's a love because of that second shade and because of the similarities in tones here. So overall, I think it's a nice palette, but I do think that this is going to be well liked by a select group of people who really do love those green tones, and they work really well for them. So, you know, I just feel like they could have made a few improvements to this and made it just a little bit more spectacular than it is, but it's still a nice palette. So let's just look at a couple quick comparisons. All right, so let's start off with the Chanel Blurry Green quad. And this quad, I love this quad, but one of the things that it does really well is break up some of those greens with these like tans and golds. So this is Blurry Green. You can see though this shade here is kind of similar to a cross between the first 2 shades. This one here is significantly different from the others, but you know, you can kind of get a very similar color story focusing on the greens from here. Now, the first palette that came to mind was actually this one from Bobbi Brown. This came out for holiday a couple of years ago. This is the Jade Stone eyeshadow palette. So I just want to go ahead and swatch a few of these greens here. So we've got this deep green. You can see this is a little bit more emerald based. Let's take a look at these 2 down here at the bottom. And you can see that's a little bit more sage. This is going to be a little bit more golden, but it is reminiscent of that in the Byredo palette. We have kind of, well, let's go ahead. We'll take a look at this lighter gold shade. No, that doesn't really match. And then we have kind of this deeper brown. Doesn't quite match, but you can see again, we get some similar hues with this palette here. But one of the great things about this one is the variation with some other shades kind of thrown in here. But I do like the idea of having the purpley burgundy shade in the Byredo, which is something unique to that. And then the last palette I want to take a look at here is the Byredo Mineralscapes palette, which came out this year. And it has still been popping up on the website, the Byredo website, periodically. But every time I see it, it's gone before I can even post it. So if you're looking for it, keep an eye out there. But let's take a look at these greens here. And I would have to say that these formulas are better in the Mineralscapes. They're creamier, they're more consistent, they're smooth, they're easy to go on. So I really like these. But tonally, I would say that really is this shade that's going to be the closest, but you can see that all of these have like a deeper, darker base to them than those in the Mineralscapes. And those are the only shades that really kind of match up at all. But I would say the Mineralscapes is a better option if you can get that. So those are my comparisons for the Transcendent palette. So let's just do a quick summary of everything that we looked at today. And we start off with the new Celine lipstick. And this is called the Le Rouge Celine in number 1, Rouge Triomphe. And I do think that this is a really beautiful red tone shade. It has some cool undertones to it. And I think it's really pretty. I do really love the formula on this. I'm not super thrilled with the fragrance. There is a bit of that powdery floral fragrance to it, and I don't really notice it while it's on. Once in a while I can catch a whiff of it, but nothing major. Formula wise though, I think it feels fantastic on the lips. I really like that a lot. Then we also took a look at the Tarte creaseless setting powder in lavender, which I think is a nice powder. So I think that's a nice option, especially if you're looking for a lavender powder. It gives a nice matte finish. Following that, we took a look at the new Hermes highlighter. And this is in the shade Or Rose. And I think it's a really beautiful kind of coppery rose metallic highlighter. Really like how this kind of melts into the skin. And then we finished off with the Byredo Transcendent palette, which I think is a nice palette, but it's not a great palette, and it had a lot of potential. The second shade here is a little bit powdery and dry. The other formulas are all nice, but there's just not a huge variation in color. And on the eyes, it can look a little bit muddy, kind of all the same. So those are my thoughts on these products. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. If you could share those down below in the comments. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you very soon.